This is the Tesoro AI podcast with Darius Gant. AI is changing the world and fast. This episode is coming to you courtesy of Tesoro AI, the #1 recruiting service for software development and AI talent.
All right, George, welcome to the show. Appreciate you taking some time out to join us.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Absolutely. So, to dive right in here, would love to learn, as we look at this world of artificial intelligence, the ever-changing world of artificial intelligence, prior to the startup that you have now, Fairo, curious, what's the why behind it? Why dive into the world of AI? Kind of what was your background prior to becoming a founder?
Yeah, sure. So before I did what's now called artificial intelligence, I did what was called big data science for many years. I think now they call that like classical AI, and then you have generative AI, right? Or whatever, something
Right.
traditional AI. I don't know. There's a few different terms I've heard describe it, but it's like predictive modeling, right? Some complicated, but all based off of probability and statistics. I studied math and econ in college. I worked in nonprofits. I worked in startups. I did the job of a data scientist. I did some software engineering. I led some teams. I had a lot of good opportunities. And that's what kind of got me into this space. Got to know some different people, learn a lot about machine learning. And then right when generative AI kind of became big hot thing, I was just starting to think about starting my own business, and it was sort of timely because I said, okay, well, seems like there's an opportunity in the market here to go and do something new.
Awesome. And thinking about that opportunity, I think your space is going to be pretty interesting here because you guys are kind of trying to remove the barrier folks has as it relates to deploying AI, right? Especially on the business side. But what was the problem that you saw where you said, you know what, this idea has some legs? What was the problem
Sure.
that you identified?
Well, I'll give you some numbers, right, that might be interesting. And these numbers have only grown in the past 2 or 3 years, right? So when I first saw the problem, it was an order of magnitude smaller than it is now. So this year, 2025, it's estimated that companies are going to spend $250 billion on AI technology, right? In fact, 92% they're going to double down on those investments, and they want to double or triple over the next 2 years. It's crazy, the numbers. These are coming from places like BCG and McKinsey. But if you ask the same companies how much of that money that we spent is returning value, how much of that has matured, only 1% would say that they've actually had like maturity on their existing AI investments. Okay. So you have this big gap.
1%, right.
This is according to
250 billion.
Right. Yeah. Because a lot of it goes into stuff like electricity or models that we train and then they get thrown out and replaced with a new one or copied by DeepSeek or something. And they're starting to see commoditization, right? We've spent a lot of money on research and development. I mean, some could say that it's vaporized, but I don't know. Is a drug R&D that turns into a generic drug like a waste? No, probably not, right?
Right.
I imagine that probably that's where AI is going to end up, and who knows how where the money's going to flow. But anyway, 1%, right? It's a big gap between spending and maturity. So we dug into that. We wanted to say, why is there this gap, right? There's so much promise in this technology. And what we kind of boiled it down to from my past experience and also talking to a lot of different people in the AI space, product managers, data scientists, executives, we discovered that there's 2 things that are slowing down success in AI adoption. One is AI skills, understanding the technology, the limitations, like what it can do, what it can't do, how to implement it, right? And then the second is actually governance, putting in guardrails around the technology to ensure that it's doing what it's intended in a way that's ethical, in a way that doesn't create harm or adverse impacts to the business, that doesn't bring risks to the business. So those 2 things were what we identified when looking at that. So our platform is designed to address those 2 things in kind of a special way, using now all the new AI technology that we have available to us.
And so when you mention, it's a big issue, right? If I'm a corporation, I want to deploy AI. I'm ultimately responsible for the outcome of what the AI does.
Yeah.
So it could mean fines, it could mean our customer dissatisfaction, and a host of other things. In your experience, what are the core things that companies are concerned about as it relates to deploying AI, whether that be internally or externally? And where is governance coming in to kind of put those guardrails where they can say, great, I feel comfortable?
Yeah. So there's a few different broad categories of risks that people are mostly interested in. At the highest level, we look at what we call operational risks, right? So, okay, AI put into some workflow, and now that failure is going to slow it down. It's going to stop product from moving. It's going to, create issues for customers. Then that translates usually into financial and reputational, right? I mean, everything
Mhm.
in a company can kind of be boiled down to dollars, I think, at the end of the day. But, sometimes the dollar amount isn't realized right away. It kind of erodes trust, right? When you think about reputational risks in particular. An example that I can think of off the top of my mind, and this is a big example. It isn't really one that a company like ours would deal with,
Mhm,
but
mhm.
Meta, they started releasing all these new AI people onto their social media. I
Yeah,
don't know who thought that that would be enjoyed or was a good idea, but that definitely hit their reputation pretty hard, Now, I don't know what the financial impact, if anything, will be of that, but that's just right. If they do that a few more times, do people start to consider other social networks, for example? Like I know TikTok has done a very good job of capturing a lot of the US market from Instagram and Reels and all that, or maybe TikTok came out first, but not on social media, so I don't really know. But I know that
mhm.
I think they have good content moderation there in a way that people kind of understand the rules of what goes and what doesn't and how to play in that
Yeah,
space. And then the algorithm also, it doesn't feel like you're being taken advantage of, like, oh, I have to post all the time to get likes, right? It's kind of like the best
right.
content wins. It's looking more at shorter term velocity metrics. So I feel like that, has created a better social media space. And then it's hit Facebook's reputation for how they've gone about it. That's just like a high level example. In terms of, I think the other part of your question was like, what are we dealing with mostly in terms of
Yeah.
risks? And okay,
You mentioned something that was interesting in regards to the algorithms and the,
yeah,
the feeling that as a content creator, oh, I need to be posting something ever so often to stay
yeah,
at the top in terms of people who get posted. And kind of one of the other things, part of the conversation is, hey, listen, I understand that the algorithms are optimizing for viewership, right? So they're going to feed me what they think that I'm most interested in, which doesn't necessarily mean that I am actually extremely interested in it. It just means that I'm more likely to click that particular thing. I make the comparison. Well, look, if you wanted to optimize my diet for what I'm most likely to reach for quickly, it's like, yeah, if you put really fatty or sugary, or like if that's how we chose our diet, right, we'd all be in a bad situation. And so there was an influencer talking about how if you gave users an opportunity to select a model, right, that optimizes for what they choose, maybe it improved the state of social media as a whole,
well,
right?
that's what I mean in terms of long term impacts. And I think the reason that these, China, these products were created in China for Chinese people first, for Chinese citizens, and then brought into the United States. And I know that China's government, they are very strict in terms of how a company like that is going to influence their population. And kind
Mm.
of in an ironic way, right? The controls of the government saying we don't want to poison our own citizens created an algorithm that when it was brought to the United States ended up faring much better. And to use your fast food analogy, I mean, I honestly think that these top algorithms in LinkedIn and Twitter and on Instagram, it's like McDonald's, it's like fast food. It's very
Right.
popular when it first came out, but now when people know about healthy eating, I think they're not doing as well. And I think you're going to see the same thing: is that people are going to say, you know what? we do want to migrate to apps that have algorithms that are, more suited to our well-being. So and this is why we as a business wouldn't address this type of use case, because we're talking
Mm-hmm.
about like massive social trends on like an incredibly large scale that can't be predicted or forecasted. Like we're going down into very narrow use cases, right? And looking
Right.
at them for bias. But this type of thing, this type of societal risk of AI, and it's before large language models, right? All these algorithms, they're standard classical ML algorithms and not LLMs. And they've already done so much damage and good in certain ways to society. But I'll just add one more point to that. The algorithms that incentivize posting, what they're doing is, especially after large language models have come on the scene, they're encouraging people to post AI generated content on their social media feed at a very high velocity, which maybe is fine
Mm-hmm.
short term, but then what you end up with is just like this really high noise barrier of like
Right.
everybody kind of posting AI generated stuff. And then the person who wants to post a thoughtful article once a week, where do they go? Maybe they go to Substack or they do something like that. And then maybe they want to
Mm-hmm.
get paid because they can't, because how do they monetize it? And now what we're doing is we're taking information that used to be shared on social media, we're putting it again behind closed doors. It's kind of having the opposite
Mm-hmm.
effect. It's not democratizing information. It's almost like littering the street. So then you go into your house or you go into a private country club in order to share information. So I have some concerns about that as well.
If you're a hiring manager and you appreciate the unique skill sets required to build AI solutions, then I would highly suggest you get your hands on our AI talent salary guide. As you know, one of the greatest challenges in building AI products is acquiring the right team. Over 100 plus pages, we dive deep into our global AI talent acquisition strategies. And with our networks in Latin America, we also provide you with actionable advice on how you can scale up your AI team cost efficiently. Once you explore our AI talent acquisition strategies, you'll never look at hiring the same way again. Links are in the description. Yeah, I never thought about it. It's kind of the inverse of democratization. You're encouraging people to really have real conversations in private.
Yeah.
Yeah, so let's talk more about some of the problems that you all
Yeah.
are specifically focused on.
Yeah, sure. So to give an example of a type of use case that we'd address, I mean, our platform does a few different things. At a high level, right, we want to make sure that all of the AI use in an organization is captured in one place. So we know that
Mhm.
AI technology is moving really fast, right? And there are a lot of different tools that you can use to build AI models, AI agents, right? You have your old school players like Databricks and Google Cloud, Vertex, where everybody has all their models from the past 10 or 15 years. And then maybe you use one of these new agent builders. Like I was using this one today, what's it called, N8N, that used to be like, it was kind of like Zapier, right? And then
Okay.
they realized that they could make a really great AI agent builder on top of their existing kind of
Hmm.
workflow automation platform. Now everyone's talking about it. Also, Stack AI. There's so many of these ones. Gunloop, right? You can use them to build a LangChain. Use them to build AI agents. So big company, every team's going to have their own preference on what technology to use, but the organization needs to have sort of a central repository of all the different models, their use cases, the agents, the workflows, right? So we provide that. And then on top of that, for each use case, we're interested in understanding risks and then how to mitigate those risks. And a lot of times when we look at like an example of a risk could be biased outcomes, right? Racist
Mhm.
outcomes, outcomes that discriminate on a protected class. And then the mitigation could be one, detection. So we want to test for bias. So we can help companies automatically set up bias testing that might take them, I don't know, days or a week or two to research and implement. They can do that in really seconds just by kind of
Mhm.
clicking one of our bias testing configurations. And then we would go call the API of their, machine learning platform of choice, be it Google or Databricks, and we would implement the bias testing automatically so it would run whenever their data sets got updated with predictions or whatever. So that's one example of like a very narrow use case of bias testing. And we're exploring different industries for this too. In
Okay.
healthcare, we're looking to team up with different AI providers, looking at clinical practice guidelines and whether or not new AI systems and conversational agents are helping doctors adhere to or deviate from these guidelines. And then if they're deviating from the guideline, then we can give some recommendations on where we've seen that and perhaps pass it back to the model developer or to the hospital so that they can improve it. And that kind of ties into like another thing that our platform does, which is vendor management for AI solutions. So you might purchase as a hospital or as an insurance company or as a bank, you might have 20, 30, 40 different model providers, agent providers, right? Having a repository of all those, knowing the last time you evaluated them for risk, for bias, knowing what to ask them, questions. We got to keep that all in one place. So we're really like the way I describe this platform, it's an agentic platform that provides AI skills and AI expertise and governance as a service. So the expertise, right, that comes from all the different agents that we have on our end, looking at all your data and saying, oh, test for bias here, send a questionnaire there, get new data here because you have a gap, right? That's the expertise layer. And then the governance layer is like calculating the risks, maybe looking at different compliance frameworks or laws or regulations and making sure that you're in compliance. So you can work with us, especially if you're like an enterprise or like a mid-sized business. You have a lot of customers, you have a lot of existing business. You can work with us to kind of protect that in terms of your AI strategy and investment.
Yeah, and when you mention vendor management, right? I imagine a scenario where mid-size, I mean, it could be true for any type of business, but just thinking of mid-size enterprise, the CTO has to make a bunch of decisions around what third-party software, AI-enabled software they use and ones that they don't.
Yeah.
I imagine that if they're using those and that software is the cause of some sort of output that they have to their customers, there's still some liability on that end. So when you say vendor management, what I pictured was, all right, let's make sure none of our vendors are doing things that would put us at risk. Is that
That's
correct?
Right. Yeah, exactly. Testing the vendor itself and understanding the vendor in isolation. But then also, depending on how a vendor is used, like what use cases that vendor is associated to, different risks can be more or less severe. For example, DeepSeek, whatever, comes out, I don't know, a month ago, and then past 2 or 3 weeks, everybody's like, ask it if Taiwan's a country, right? Ask it if the north of India is part of China, right? And, for some people, maybe that is a big risk, right? If you are using this in schools, right? That would be a huge risk, right? Because you're using that in history class and you're asking kids questions. And like we in America have our own interpretation of these events and we want an AI to be aligned with that, right? So that's a guardrail that you could set in our platform and like check against and test against. But if you're using this thing for like coding, like, do we really care? You know what I mean?
Right.
I don't know. Maybe you have some moral people, but we hire people at our companies that believe these things that this chatbot believes. We're not going to fire them, right? So I don't know. As an AI person, maybe I have a moral flexibility about it, but in my mind, from our company standpoint, it's all about like understanding your principles, defining and implementing them for a use case for a vendor, right? And being consistent across them, whatever they may be. I mean, we don't accept people on our tool that want to use AI for malice, right? But like stuff like this that kind of sits in the gray area, like we're happy to entertain like the use of DeepSeek for coding or the blocking of DeepSeek in an area where bias and misinformation about political hot topics is important. I know Grok just came out, and I'm seeing on my Responsible AI LinkedIn, people are asking it all sorts of questions. Who won the 2020 election? What do we think about vaccines, right? These are the types of things that we can help companies with inside them. Like, right, because you don't want to be on AI governance LinkedIn as a CTO. You don't have time to read all this stuff, So we put it into the tool to make sure that it's kind of as a service doing all that stuff for you. Grok comes out, great. We have a whole test set for Grok across all these different risk domains, and then you can decide to evaluate them based on your needs.
Okay. And as you mentioned, whether something's in the gray area or whether it's black and white depends on industry, depends on the company. Is it up to the company to then set the proper level of risk across those different areas of the business? Or are you all able to come in with some knowledge base where we say, hey, you are at risk of bias in this particular group because we understand that particular industry?
So it depends a bit on what's illegal and what isn't, right?
Mhm.
There are certain industries where there are very hard rules. And with our customers, obviously, if they want to break the law, that's up to them. But our company wouldn't, right? Our platform wouldn't encourage it. If you cross
Right.
a red line on, for example, let's think life insurance, right? You cannot use zip code information when pricing life insurance because it's too heavily correlated with stuff like race. So if you price it, that's like effectively like modern day life insurance redlining, right? Which like
Mhm.
you would basically you just wouldn't do it, right? So stuff like that we have to be careful about. And then there's also this thing concept of what's called a proxy variable, right? So proxy variable is a variable that's very highly correlated with a protected variable. So like say race, right? What are
Right.
some proxy variables for race in a life insurance pricing algorithm? We can look at things like zip code. We can look at things like uh, educational attainment, right? If you cross those two things together, zip code, educational attainment, and BMI, certain
Right.
medical diseases, we might be able to like guess not only your race, we could probably guess like where your genetic history is from. These
Mhm.
algorithms are this smart. So us as a company, we have to be very adept at understanding proxies, multivariate proxies, and how they relate to protected classes. So that's where the statistics comes in the job. And that's why, working with a company like insurance, we're a little bit more strict. We don't want to say,
Right.
oh, this isn't it, because then they can sue us maybe.
Right. You can't
Not
go
that
in
that's
and
the
make a
only
decision.
reason, yeah.
You
But
just have to
yeah,
give them the information. You're like, it's kind of like the lawyer. It's like, look, I can't tell you not to do this. I can only tell you that this is a horrible idea.
yeah, but we also have, I mean, a tiny bit of risk on our end, right? Like they're trusting us to
Yeah.
make these evaluations for them, to understand whether to run these more complex algorithms and to do it well and to use the latest knowledge on how to do it. Because as models get more fancy, it's not just like logistic regression or linear regression anymore, right? With a linear regression, there really are only so many ways variables can interact with each other. But when you're using one of these neural nets, especially if you have like millions of parameters in it, like I said, they could probably look at your medical history, your BMI, your zip
Mhm.
code, your age, and they could be like, oh yeah, well this combination only happens to like not only just like a whole race, but they could be like country of origin level understanding. It's scary the stuff that this stuff can do.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So I'm curious how then, like, what's engagement like with Fairo? Is it something that just kind of sits in the background and there's an alert that comes up if things go wrong, or is it? You mentioned platform, so I'm guessing that
Yeah,
there's
yeah.
actually this UI. But what does that look like for someone to engage and get access to this information or notifications or understanding of where they are actually at risk?
Depends on your role, job in the company.
Hmm.
If you are product manager, IT leader, data scientist, more like because some of the companies we work with, they're big enough that they've hired
Right.
data scientists to work specifically with our platform, right? So they
Hmm.
would they
Hmm.
would see everything. But in my mind, you want to make this stuff as sort of low touch as possible. So if you're
Hmm.
your average software engineer, you're building AI, all you might see from us is a Jira ticket come up with your name on it that says, hey, take a look at adding this metric to your Datadog metric collection or something like that. Or we might open a pull request on your GitHub and say, hey, bump this version from this to that of this model, or we might make a suggestion like that. So we could do it within the tools that exist because like it's 2025, right? And
Right.
everybody has so many SaaS platforms that they use. And nobody
Right.
really wants to use another one. So we kind of have to understand that and say, all right, maybe only one or two people, it's enough value added for them to actually log in and do stuff. The rest, how do we automate it on top of their existing tools? So it's kind of a mix like that.
Yeah. I'd love to get your perspective on agents and from the government's perspective. I mean, we could take this a million different ways, generally speaking, around agents. But there was an example that really opened my eyes, and I forget who was speaking about this, but it came out of the AI Paris conference. If you have an AI agent if you have an AI agent and you give it a directive, you give it a goal to, hey, make a reservation for me at, one of the top restaurants, let's just say in New York City. And the way I define an agent is an agent, you give it a goal, it's going to figure out its path to accomplishing that goal, independent of how you think it should be done. Right, the
Yeah.
agent's going to get it done.
Yeah.
Versus AI automation when you're defining a path. So within that, if the AI agent is actually going to set the reservation and then decides, well, the restaurant is completely booked up, but I'm going to hack the system reservation. Right? Okay. Yeah, I did want you to get the reservation for me, but I didn't want you to break the law.
Yeah.
Right. And so just given that 2025 is what people are calling the year of AI agents, would love to get your perspective on governance or risks that we're not thinking about as it relates to AI agents. Or perhaps as a company where you kind of sacrifice control of how the agent accomplishes a task, do you really sacrifice control, or is there an ability to put guardrails around the agents?
Well, there's certainly some ability to put guardrails. Like, for example, all right, every agent, even the ones where they say it's not a workflow, it's just a different interface. So don't be fooled by giving it mouse and keyboard access, right? Now that's what it has to control. Now, that's the same thing, though, that we use to work with a computer, right? So, hypothetically speaking, if you give the agent access to that and basically let them launch any application and type anything they want into the system, yeah, I guess they can do what a human could do, right? So they could,
Right.
if a human could hack the system, the agent could hack the system.
Fair enough.
to
Fair
be to
enough.
be honest, like I haven't thought too much about that, those types of scenarios.
That's
Like that on the edge of doomsday stuff, like the HAL 9000, like contradictory commands sort of thing, or whatever it's called from
uh-huh.
2000. You know what I mean? Like we're just like his wires get crossed. I've
Yeah.
not thought about that. Like there is a part of me that thinks, oh, these models actually aren't smart enough to do that. Like one
Mm-hmm.
example that I can give you is I don't know if you heard about the deep research that came out from OpenAI. It takes 5 to 30 minutes to do its job. That's because it's calling the best reasoning model like tens of times over, like doing loops and loops and loops and loops and loops. And like, it's impressive, right? But it's like, I don't know, there's something about it. To me, I do wonder if we're starting to hit some sort of like limit on this exponential growth, for a little bit. So I don't know
Right.
if 2025 is going to be the year of like an agent being able to do that, but who knows? I mean, I'm not an expert on this. I know I'm an expert on some stuff, but that kind of stuff I'm not an expert
Yeah.
on.
Kind of tough to be an expert on it anyway, because it's just such a new space. And the thing that as it relates to agents, it's the they're just not reliable enough right now for us to do anything out of outside of low risk consumer type applications. And so
Yeah.
with this whole commentary around 2025 is the year of the agents, well, we're having enough problems with non-agent AI. Are we really
How
going to
about
deploy
upgrading
it?
Alexa, right? Like, the thing is, it's so expensive. Even these models that are good, they're still too expensive to run that I don't trust my Alexa to order stuff for me. Like, I still go
Mhm.
onto the app and use the software that really hasn't changed in like 20 years, by the way, to order something.
Mhm.
Because, like, the UI designers there, they did a really good job making it easy for me as a consumer to want to buy something and then buy it and ship it to myself or my brother or my parents' address like really fast,
Right.
So,
Yeah, yeah. No, I'd 100% have a problem if I said, hey, ask an agent to, hey, book me the cheapest flight to New York City, and it books one out in 5 years out.
yeah, or like with a 15-hour layover, they put you on Spirit or Frontier. I mean, I don't know.
Yeah, yeah. So in your world of governance, what are the types of organizations that are most focused on this governance piece, or making sure they're in alignment with AI governance?
I would say companies that already are dealing with regulations, healthcare, insurance, financial, technology, those are the ones where we've gotten the most interest and traction. I'd love to, like I said, we have the expertise engine and the governance. I'd love to figure out a way to position our product to the broader market of people that are working with AI, because I think that the
Mhm.
information that we capture and the recommendations that we give, like I said, about technology selection, testing, monitoring, all that use case definition, product requirements, like I feel like we have a lot to offer, but we're still working on how to make an offering outside of those. I mean, we've got a growing business in those areas, right? But I think to make this, have it be the full vision that I have for the company, which is sort of like a ubiquitous household tool to help people with their AI strategies and governance and upskilling their teams. That's what we're going to need to get to is figure out a way to get to the broader market.
Yeah, and within the organizations or the industries that do have more adoption, you mentioned insurance, you mentioned healthcare, you
Yeah.
mentioned financial services. I guess what is it that is really what is the catalyst for them? Why are they moving more quickly than other organizations?
So in insurance, it's actually quite interesting. What I've noticed is that there's a lot of state laws coming on the books. So
Mm,
now that could get hard to manage. Insurance is still regulated at the state level here in the United States. So Colorado comes out with a law, Oregon's coming out with a law, right? Now they're like, oh, come on. Our compliance people don't have time to deal with all this, right?
right.
So how do we bridge the gap between data science and compliance for those laws? We've dealt with that in insurance, right? In healthcare, going back to what I hinted at earlier, a lot of it is around care guidelines. Not everything is a hard regulation, not everything is a medical device, but
Hmm.
clinical practice guidelines are very important. Malpractice is a big liability for healthcare organizations, and just having systems that are aligned with those goals is
Hmm.
extremely important, not only to the medical centers and the physicians, but also these academic bodies that govern healthcare, like the AMA and the ASA, and there's a bunch of them, right? And you can have whatever opinion you have on them, but they've got a tight grip on healthcare, and they actually have a lot of interest in ensuring that clinical care standards are upheld as we start to transition to AI, perhaps substituting certain functions of a doctor. So there's a good market there, just on the basis of a group of individuals wanting to continue to assert their standards. So we found that that's very compelling reason
Yeah.
to look into this.
And I imagine it's more of a loss prevention thing for them, right? So we want to make sure that, well, one, we don't put ourselves out of business because we decided to use an AI that is biased towards a specific group, but also fines, just making sure they're getting fined by states, by on a federal level.
Yeah. Federal level, right? Like, who knows what's going to happen there? At the state level, definitely. And then also, yeah, like civil litigation, big
Yeah.
business in healthcare.
Do you come into many situations where you're working with an enterprise or even a mid-level organization and they're trying to make a decision around whether they build their risk and compliance in-house versus kind of contracting out to you, or I guess looking to you as a vendor?
Yeah, I mean, I've won and lost deals on the basis of that. I don't think of myself as a compliance substitute. I think of us as a complement and sort of an instrument. Honestly, a lot of it depends on what type of person you get on the other side of the line.
Ah,
If
interesting.
you get
Okay.
like a person who is in privacy and in risk, but also like resonates with the product vision of the company, it's a lot easier to get a deal done. If you get a product person who has a conscious around privacy and risk, it's a lot easier to get a deal done. If you get a product person that doesn't care about risk and privacy, or an IT person that doesn't care about product, it's almost impossible to sell the product, because we kind of bridge that gap between, your risk and compliance requirements and your product requirements, trying to advance both missions simultaneously, whereas existing platforms are kind of only focused on one. So
Mm-hmm.
the sell is a bit harder at first, but as the market changes, AI is a multidisciplinary tool. It touches lots of different things. It touches domain expertise, touches data, it touches risk and privacy. So like a tool that is designed to work with that also has to touch those things. So the sales cycle at first is tough, because to find those people that share the
Right.
vision. On the product side, caring about risk and privacy. On the privacy and risk side, caring about product. It's hard, but when you find them, it's a really great business relationship.
And for the people who do decide, you know what, we'll just take a vendor approach versus trying to build internally. What would you say is the insight that they have that maybe someone who says, "Yeah, we're going to build internally"? What's the difference from an ROI perspective, or what is the required investment?
Well, I would say that they understand that they don't have individuals in their company that have expertise in all these areas, right? So, like, what are we bringing together in the platform? We're bringing together top of the line expertise on the latest open source AI, latest evaluations, latest fine tuning frameworks, right? All of that AI knowledge baked into the platform. We're bringing the latest expertise on regulations, okay, on bias, on risk management, baked into the platform, right? MITRE, Atlas, all
Mm-hmm.
is just baked in. NIST, risk management, NIST government, all baked into the platform, right? And then we're also bringing a certain degree. I mean, this is depending on, we have different ways that we work with different customers. Some of them, we will provide them with professional consulting services too, in addition to the tool.
Mm-hmm.
And in those ones, really, they realize that if we don't bring in somebody who's worked with AI for a decade, we're just going to waste our money on this stuff. So a lot of it is sort of like, do I have to hire the resources to get the expertise in house, or can I purchase the expertise at a huge discount from a SaaS platform? And yes, I am giving up when I do that. I'm giving up a certain amount of in-house domain knowledge on this technology. Now, whether I
Mm-hmm.
care about that, I don't know. I mean, people have outsourced cyber domain knowledge, and I don't think it matters, right? Like, I think the whole premise of SaaS businesses is that there are things that are not core to your business, and you can buy them at
Right.
a discount because we have economies of scale, right? So we have our
Yeah.
economies of scale on the AI expertise and the risk and compliance expertise for AI. So if you want to buy that from us, and then if you want strategic help, then you can also purchase the professional services, and that's kind of how we do it.
Yeah, I do think there's some lift can be very significant if you don't have the people on your team. Need to go out and find those people. Need for those people to be good, and then they need to build whatever it is that you need. And there's a time component to that, right? So if you're going to wait 18 months to bring this all together, right, you've missed a lot of opportunities, or in your case, exposed yourself to a lot of
Yeah.
risk.
But there's probably, I don't know how many people in the country that do what we do and what I do that have that cross disciplinary knowledge. A few hundred max, right? I don't know. Not a lot. You're not going to find them and hire them. Probably half of them are starting their own business. So
Right.
and then the other half are at Google and Microsoft, and then there's maybe 10 on the open market, and you think they want to go work for your company in city X. Like, it's not going to happen. The people
Right.
that realize that are
Right.
the ones that will work with us. Now, over time, right, that expertise can be developed, but it takes a little while. Like I said, I've been working with AI for just about 10 years now. I mean, that's right. It's a long time.
What on you mentioned professional services element? What are some of the things? Because we're not talking about something that's just, hey, just plug this in and you're ready to go. There can be an element of customization, professional services that happen. When does that become necessary?
I would say it depends what your goals are, right? If you want to check the box on a few compliance and risk controls, track your use cases, take whatever insights we surface and recommendations and implement them, and you're good with that, then you don't need any professional services. If you're
Mm-hmm,
trying to
mm-hmm.
like reinvent your whole company around AI, there's just stuff that the platform can't do. Like the platform can't rewrite your business processes,
Right,
and then
right, yeah,
integrate AI
yeah.
into them, right? So like a lot of it is that, you know, how like it can give basic product requirement suggestions, but like okay, we use the same AI as everyone, right? We use Claude on AWS or whatever, right? That's the best model on AWS. So
Mm-hmm.
right? If Claude can't figure it out for you when you upload your product requirements to it and then ask it to refine them, we can refine it a bit better because we have, like I said, all this knowledge stored in our app. But I'm still a believer that like a real person who's dealt with AI for 10 years It was going to talk to you and your stakeholders and interview them on their objectives, talk to your customers, talk to your channel partners. I think I'm going to do a better job than the AI personally. I mean, like, companies will try to tell you that the AI could do as good of the same job, but as somebody who sells AI, like, I still believe in myself to do a better job in certain areas. Maybe that'll change and I'll be unemployed or sitting on a beach. But right now, I think this is the state of affairs.
Yeah, no, that's an interesting point. It makes me think of, we're building this bill pay solution, but you do have like bill pay providers out there like, hey, we're going to automate the entire process. But is it really the entire process, right? You may be able to automate certain pieces of it, but did you think about some things that are outside of like your accounting systems, right? Like,
Yeah.
where does an email land? Where does the invoice land, and then how does the invoice get to the team that needs to validate it, and then that validation, how does that get to the accounting system? So there's all these, and if a company has a different process, one company has a different process from another company, there's going to be some level of required customization, professional services.
And there's a reason SAP is still king. I'm pretty sure that even the big five tech use it. So, like, what does that tell you? They couldn't figure it out.
Right.
Like this is the thing. Like, we try to help people be realistic. Okay, you want to automate your whole billing process with AI. What are we going to do at Fairo with our tool, right? And then, like I said, some of the professional services can help you do it really well. What's the cost of an error? Okay, like if the AI misclassifies a payment, what's the fine from the IRS? Or if it sends it to the wrong person, like, do you have certain terms that you have to meet? If you don't meet net 30,
Right.
net 90, well, what happens, right? What's your credit score look like? I mean, there's so many impacts you can trace. And eventually, as we learn, like, I do believe that our tool can start to think of these questions for you based on your domain, right? But right now, we're kind of building that intelligence. And that's where me coming into, because I'm helping my system learn too from myself. I have come up with a good idea. I'm like, I worked with this customer on this use case. If we have their permission to de-identify the information, we can build that into the knowledge base of our tool. And then next time somebody comes up with a billing use case, we ask them those questions.
Yeah, no, super interesting because that really gets to kind of where AI is. If you think about SaaS products that traditionally didn't have AIs, they were built to be turn the light switch on and let's go. With AI, there's just some natural component of customization, professional services. If you want it to work at a higher level, someone probably could still just give you a SaaS version of the product that's very deterministic.
Yeah, I mean, if you're trying to just like take this podcast and cut it into 5 clips and put subtitles, like, right? Yeah, I'm sure an AI could do an okay job. Maybe you'd need to tweak the clips to be ones like it doesn't pick the most interesting ones, but it'll cut it and generate the subtitles for you. But will it understand this whole discussion and find out those touch points? Like, maybe not yet. So it can enhance, right? But it's not gonna do everything yet. So you want to figure out how to best integrate it into your strategy based on your risk tolerance and organizational controls and all that other stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And you did mention the scarcity of the talent, right? You yourself are scarce talent, just being someone who's been in the space for 10 years in a very particular intersection within AI. Curious how you thought about, as you built out the platform, and maybe you kind of were a one-man band in the beginning, what talent from an AI perspective best fit your organization?
So to be honest, I didn't go looking for people with AI expertise. I actually just went and found one gentleman who works with us. He had a pretty decent job in the IT department at a large hospital in Brazil, the biggest one. And then the other one, he was based out of Hyderabad. Now he's living in Bangalore with his buddies. Just graduated his master's program, and I think he has some more math than the gentleman in Brazil, because he was doing a master's program in some sort of engineering. Both of them, though, I will say, with the right training that I gave them, have kind of upskilled. And I've been working with them each. One of them almost 2 years, the other one maybe 1.5. So I have like a really good, these two guys are really good, and I've invested a lot in them myself too. In terms of plug and play AI resources, I don't have a lot of experience with that. I know you're in this space. I mean, what is it like for you?
Yeah, I mean, simply, obviously, we take a more of an international approach as well,
Yeah.
right? You know, the competition within the side North America is intense to say the least, particularly when you're up against the likes of FANG companies. So then it leaves you with, all right, well, let's explore talent, you know, Latin America. And I don't have experience, you know, in terms of what we do out of Eastern Europe and in the Middle East, but Latin America, we just find time zones end up being a huge advantage, especially when you need to train someone, right? So it's I don't want to be up at 4 a.m. But just iterating, getting iterations in and being
Yeah.
able to sync. But I think what we've also found is that hey, look, you know, there's less competition in other markets where you can get a really like to your point, someone who's really great at math. That's the basis for AI, understanding AI, right? And then you can see that talent and say, here, you know, if you have a training program, that person, assuming that they're ambitious, right, and hardworking, will progress pretty quickly. Assuming you need a higher level of talent, right? It does get more competitive. However, still have opportunity. You can be providing opportunities to someone who doesn't have the same opportunities as if you were hunting in the very competitive pool within North America.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, if you want to know my opinion too, like I think deep AI knowledge, the kind that you would need to even train or design a large language model or complex agent reinforcement learning, I mean, you don't even need that. I mean, your job is to kind of assemble the parts from these companies like IKEA, you know? You don't need to train the model yourself. I mean, maybe when you're in a slightly more advanced use case, like some of the stuff that we're building, we're doing some reinforcement learning based on what users think about the suggestions we give, and then using that to surface or unsurface different ones. Okay, but I'm designing that for now. Maybe in a few years, the need for having somebody with machine learning engineering expertise comes that we have to hire one or maybe two more
Right.
people. And I'm talking that's a company that'll probably at that point have like over 100 people. So just like to put it into perspective, like a tech company that gives AI recommendations as part of its business may only need one of these people. So
Mm,
just put that into
interesting.
perspective. That's just my
Yeah,
opinion.
there.
I mean, every company's different.
Well, yeah. I think you find that you're starting to see even startups that are you may not even consider they may not even consider themselves an AI startup themselves, but they figured out how to pull in the right AI technology to then deliver a solution that still solves the actual problem, particularly even thinking about some of the LLMs. And I do think that there's value in being a expert in an individual tool. So you were mentioning some of the AI agent builder tools.
Yeah,
If you were an expert in like Crew AI, right? Like you don't
yeah,
necessarily have this really deep level of experience in machine learning, or you may not even be the best at Python, but you can still build some agents. And as the technology continues to progress, you just being an expert in a particular tool actually
yeah.
becomes extraordinarily valuable.
Yeah, I think like anything, right? It's a risk and it has a likelihood to have a reward, right? If the tool that you're an expert in becomes extremely popular, then it's great. If it doesn't, then you got to find something else. But
Right.
yeah, right. It all depends on what your needs are. But I would also put us in that category. I mean, we were not an AI company at first. We had built a governance platform, and then I started to realize that the data in our platform would be really we could use it to generate these wonderful strategic insights for companies.
Mm-hmm.
So that's kind of how we got on it.
What was that? I guess what was that realization? Because there's a lot of companies that think they have good data that they can use to generate insights
Oh
that
yeah.
may or may not be true. But there's a lot of people who think they do. You know, how did it strike you to say, hey, you know what? Let's move forward and leverage this data to build some AI on our own.
Well, I was doing some professional services for somebody, and I realized that what I was doing probably could have been automated. That's kind of how it hit
Mm.
me. I was doing services using our tool to do the services. And I was like, let me build an agent to, that's just how it hit me.
Product.
Like, right? I was trying to make my own life easier. And then I was like, you know,
Nice.
that's just how it came to be.
Okay. Okay. So
Yeah.
professional development or professional services comes to the rescue again.
You
Awesome.
always, I
Um,
think to do good with AI, you have to be doing stuff. if you're not doing stuff, if you're not working with people, solving problems, kiss your AI dreams goodbye. Like, you need to be solving problems to get value from AI. Like, that's the number one thing. If you're doing that, you'll think of good things to do, you'll solve problems, then you'll automate a part of it. You got a product there.
Yeah, good point. Because if you're AI, I mean, no one's going to think that you have a genius technology if it's not actually solving the problem. Right?
Yeah.
It doesn't get me from A to B. I know we only got a few minutes left here, but I did want to leave some time, as you know, we're just still breaking into 2025 here. But anything we should keep an eye out from Fairo this year, or any announcements you want to make?
Yeah, I think I keep an eye out for this engine insights, intelligence as a service offering. We haven't figured out how to brand it. As you can see, I'm, using jumbled words to describe it, but I think we're going to move outside of our enterprise use cases and professional services model into a SaaS offering that can help any AI product manager be an expert in their domain of artificial intelligence. So, we might start that off in healthcare and insurance first, but over time, this is going to be something that anybody at any company can pick up, use, put into their environment, and get extreme value, be a top of the line product manager in AI.
All right, awesome. Yeah, and lastly, for anyone who wants to be in contact, whether it be investor, potential customer, or even talent, right? What's a good way to follow along with the journey?
So you can follow our page Fairo, which you can find from my LinkedIn, and then also if you want to send me a LinkedIn message. I'm not getting crazy amounts of LinkedIn messages, so at this point, I'll still answer. So feel free and go and shoot me a message.
Well, look, if you break out, I'm definitely claiming that we were.
Yeah, well, no,
we helped
I'll
out.
give I'll give you my phone number. I mean, this is like, I don't forget an opportunity like this, so I really appreciate it.
No, absolutely. And this has been a very informative conversation. So I appreciate you
Okay.
letting us dive in deep and just you being so
Yeah.
candid with sharing your thoughts.
Yeah, thanks so much. This is a great pleasure and a lot of fun.